Hello, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay. We had some technical issues this morning, but thank you all for being here and for joining our webinar on perfecting the Spanish Solar PPA market and managing risk with highly volatile. Thank you for signing up. My name is Dana. I am the events manager of this webinar, as well as of the Solarplaza Summit Spain, taking place in Madrid on July 4th. And today I will be moderating this session. So let me give you a brief overview of what we will be doing today. I will start off by giving you some practical information. Then I'll give you a bit of a background about who we are at Solarplaza. Then I'll introduce our panel of experts before we move on to some slides from both of them. After that, we will move on to a discussion with our speakers, along with some poll questions for our audience. And last but not least, we'll have a Q&A involving all of your questions. So about the practical details, first of all, I would like to inform you that this webinar is somewhat of a jump start to our Spain Summit, which this year will be our special 5th edition, so we're switching it up a little bit. You can find out about the lineup and the program and the information on our website. The great news is that if you have signed up for this webinar, whether you're online right now or watching the recording later on, you will be eligible for a 15% discount on your ticket for the Spain Summit. And our marketing will provide you with a bit more information about that. So we do want to make this webinar as interactive as possible. So I want to encourage you to start sending on your questions, and we will get to them in a bit. You can post them in the question box on your right-hand side at any time. The webinar recording will become available shortly, and you will also receive more information on this from our marketing team. Okay, so now let me give you a little bit of a background about who Solarplaza is, just in case this is your first webinar with us. In a nutshell, we are a knowledge-sharing platform with a mission to accelerate the energy transition. Established in 2004, we're based in Rotterdam. We organize events almost all over the world. We're proud to have organized almost 200 events so far in 44 countries worldwide. We're connecting a network of over 60,000 solar PV professionals. And besides our summit, we also provide newsletters, resources, and obviously, as you can see, as well, webinars. And besides our platform, we have opened up a consultancy branch recently, as well as a foundation. So I do invite you to check out our website to have a look at the full list of services and initiatives we provide. That was it, quick and easy from my end. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce our panel of experts. Eric Landström, Regional Lead of PPA Transactions in South Europe at Pexapac, and Bruno Marquez from Lighthouse, Senior Manager of Power Markets. Thank you both for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. Maybe I would like you to have a quick round of introductions. Maybe you can each just name your field of expertise and your role in PPAs, just for our audience to get an overview of who you are. Maybe Eric, you want to take it up first?
Yeah, for sure. This is one of my older bios here that hasn't been updated for quite a while. So I'm Eric Landström, Swedish citizen, currently living in Madrid, where I opened Pexapark's Madrid office. I am, as you said, the regional lead for Southern Europe, so that means that I focus on the markets of Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece, where I lead the long-term PPA structuring and advisory. In that role, we have managed to do quite a few PPAs. I mean, Pexa Park in general has supported and structured about 25 gigawatts all over Europe, making us probably the biggest PPA advisory in Europe. And you guys may know us from such services as PexaQuote, which has become the main source of, let's say, PPA prices in the market today. Yeah, pleasure to be here with you guys. Also looking forward to seeing all of you in Madrid and probably in Rome as well. As those are my markets. And looking forward to having a nice discussion here with Bruno as well. Maybe I'll pass it over to you, Bruno.
Thank you, Eric. And Bruno, your turn.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Eric. First of all, I would like to thank Solarplaza to invite Lightsource and myself to talk about PPA, in particular PPAs in Spain. I'm Bruno Marquez, senior power market manager in Lightsource PP. I joined Lightsource 4 years ago in order to secure the route to market for all our projects in development for the Iberia region in France with other colleagues. In the power markets, we're close to 13 people in Europe to try to handle this activity. And I would be likely to talk about the PPAs in Spain along with Eric and see what will be the challenges and across Europe and then across Spain.
Thank you very much both for your introduction. And I know that you both have prepared a few slides just to give an overview of the market from each of your personal perspective. So I would suggest that we move on to Eric's slides first, and then we will have Bruno's.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, perfect. So if we go to the next slide, we'll have a very good summary, or a good summary. We have my summary of what's happening in the Spanish market at the moment. I can see there that the latest version didn't come through, but let's say there was a big grid permit catch-up effect in January, where we saw a lot of grid connection agreements being given. That has speeded up the sort of development of the Spanish market. We see now several large portfolios looking for support, looking for offtake, and that has switched, or we likely think that it's going to switch the market from the heavily sellers market that it has been in the recent past to more of a balanced, or perhaps even a buyer's market in the next few months and years. You know, we still see a lot of regulatory interventions. I mean, this highlights that the grid catch-up effect. I mean, there was no permits almost given prior, making it a seller's market, and now all of a sudden we see this massive amount of permits being given at once. We also should say that in the recent past, the last 2 weeks, we've seen extreme cannibalization. I mean, we generally see quite extreme cannibalization in the shoulder periods, but it has been very extreme lately. I mean, if anybody is a nerd like me, you probably look at the Red Electrica app on your phone and can see that prices go down to almost zero in the middle of the day when the sun is up, and so that's led to this crazy cannibalization, and that leads us to also think that Miteco needs to get moving on this battery and flex regulation and making sure that there is a capacity market. On the market is in general, I mean, we can just highlight that Spain is a very mature and active PPA market. You have many different financing options. Banks in general are quite comfortable at this moment taking merchant risk, which should probably change in light of this cannibalization. Yeah, you've seen a lot of the sort of unsubsidized activity being focused on solar, but increasingly on wind. And I think one thing to highlight, which we should be talking more about, is the way that the Spanish subsidy regime essentially is a sort of a revenue regime, and with these high prices, many investors are now seeing a large part of their portfolio essentially going off the merchant cliff, and now they have merchant volumes instead of subsidized volumes, essentially switching the kind of investment they previously had. And that means that they need a lot more energy revenue management over the next few months and years. You're seeing a lot of offtake competition in the region, but with more volumes that should wind down. And yes, as I said, switching from a seller's to a buyer's market. I think we can move on to the next slide. Don't want to take up all of the time here, and just look at some common structures in the market. I think we can still see that all structures are available. You can get pay as produced, you can get fixed hourly profile, all the base loads, you can get floors and collars. The option structures generally we've seen lately have been our clients are very interested in them, but they're generally very highly priced and are not necessarily the best structures, especially given the high cost of margin calls. But generally, a lot of deals in Spain and moving fast. Next slide on the wind, maybe. Here you can see what has been happening in the sort of unsubsidized wind market. I mean, this publicly announced onshore wind PPA deals that we're showing on the left here, it's part of Pexpark's PPA tracker. It doesn't show all deals because a lot of deals are secret. It's kind of an obscure market or opaque, let's say, but it shows the trend here, and a lot of wind is now being sold unsubsidized, which is also very good for off-takers in general, because it means that you can essentially create a more level portfolio with both wind and solar complementing each other. And then maybe a last trend that I see here as well on the next slide is what we see as the new way that utilities are the way that utilities commonly do business these days. The term market is too expensive to engage with, and the volatility is too high, and so we see a lot of back-to-back deals. And why do you see back-to-back deals? Well, generally some off-takers, corporate off-takers, have a lower corporate credit rating, or not as stable, and it's easier for investors to contract directly with an investment grade off-taker, and thus get better financing terms. And that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be to do several PPAs and thus get a diversification effect, which we've seen some investors in IPPs do as well. And with that very quick, speeded up presentation, I think I can hand it over to Bruno, and hopefully we'll get some time at the end to answer some of your questions, which is always the most fun anyway.
Thank you very much, Eric. Yes, indeed. Bruno, if you would like to take it away.
Of course. Thank you very much. So very briefly, just introducing Lightsource. I think that most of you know about Lightsource, but for those who does not, I mean, Lightsource is one of the global's major solar developer globally. We're developing utility scale projects. We started from the UK. It has been created in 2010, so close to 13 years ago. And we have grown significantly thanks to BP and the joint venture up to 50% since 2017. We developed close to 9 gigawatt capacity, only solar photovoltaic projects. And since BP helped us in our growth, we have an ambition to develop and reach our targets by 2025 to develop 25 gigawatts of solar capacity in the coming 2-3 years. We are quite experienced team across all the activities and the teams. We have signed more than 35 PPAs globally, which is close to 4 gigawatt capacity. In Europe, we're talking about a pipeline of close to 11 gigawatt capacity, and Spain is definitely one of the major hubs for Lightsource, and as it is for the PPA activity. If we can switch to the following slide, you can see that Spain, and as said Eric, Spain is definitely one of the major markets, the hot market in PPA. It's close to from 30 to 40% of the PPA activity in Europe, and we can see that it was one of the latest countries to come along in negotiating PPAs, but little by little, Spain has become one of the major countries. And we can see that at the beginning in 2019, 2018, the utility PPAs were quite important, and more through the years until 2022, we can see that the percentage of corporate offtakers are taking more and more importance because they're getting more experience and they're more in the need to reach their sustainability targets. And we can see that the utilities PPAs are less and less present in the area. In the following slide, just the basics really about PPAs, why we do PPAs and what's the purpose of the PPAs. But I'm pretty sure that most of the assistants participants knows about it, but just giving the highlights. For the developer, for the PPAs is definitely to secure the stream of revenues in order either to enable a project finance with the lenders, or if you do for own equity, at least to give confidence on the financial viability of the projects. And obviously, it gives additionality to the system, which is what the off-takers are looking for, and which will replace conventional generation. On the other side, it's mirroring. The off-takers are looking to secure the energy cost for a defined period of time, and trying to source the guarantees of origin, which are from our renewable projects. And definitely, and it is very important, it contributes to reach the sustainable company targets. And that's why we see from the last 3 years the importance of the corporate offtake versus the utility offtake. You can see on the right table what are the main terms of the PPA. We won't talk about that, but just see what's the most valuable terms about is it virtual, physical, what are the tenor, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. In Spain, it's common having a 10 years structure. Very important, the date of the plant when the plant is coming into operation, which is impacting the price. Which price and structure? Is it a fixed price? Is it indexed to market? Is there any cap and floor? And another point is the credit support amounts. That is always a difficult item to negotiate with the corporate off-takers. Well, any off-takers, utilities are corporate. If we can move to the following slides, and maybe we can advance what we'll be talking is what are the challenges today, this month, this year, and the coming year is we all know what's happening since the beginning of the year, that close to 28 gigs of capacity in Spain has been granted environmental permits, the DIA. But we have a fear in the coming months and in the coming 2 years that the project has to be operational by June 2025. And it is a huge amount of capacity in Spain, and that will trigger two complexity. The first one is the bottleneck in administration. Will the public administration be able to give all the permitting on time by then? And the other point is the supply chain, how we can face this supply chain disruption eventually in terms of modules, in terms of EPC, in terms of inverters and transformers, knowing that we have to build and construct within 2 years. So that will be definitely a major challenge. Another challenge, definitely, and Spain is very known for that, unfortunately, is the regulatory changes. There's a lot that has coming out in the past 2 years, and Spain has been known for that. The government in Spain is willing to push towards the new market design by the end of this year. We have the mini clawback, some clawback that has been put in the past 2 years, and it has an impact always on the PPA negotiation. We always have to face or anticipate how it will impact on the PPA, how we can foresee and the evolution of it, and how we can mitigate all the risks. And the other one is the financing capability. As Eric told, there's a lot of lenders who accept, or even developers who likes going totally merchant or huge portion of merchant. And the lenders did accept in the past 2 years as well this possibility. So there was there was a appetite from the lenders. However, we're talking about in the coming 2 years more than 28 or 30 gigawatt capacities of renewable, and that will be question is how this will be assumed by all the lenders in Spain, in Europe. Is it possible to finance some of or all these projects? So this will be challenging for the developers and for the financing platform facility. And I think we can skip and go on the discussions or the question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you both for giving us an overview. So before we actually move on to the discussion, I would like to get a little bit of insight about who the audience is we're talking to today. So I would like to use a few seconds just to post poll questions for our audience, just to let us know what the profile is. It would help us to kind of navigate the right questions today and just see what we have to focus on. So, and then we will post the results.
Yeah, in the meantime, Bruno, I guess it's interesting to see how banks are still talking about financing merchant when we're seeing this very high cannibalization. With April being in the 50% captured rate, I think it's hard to see how this could go on.
Okay.
What are you seeing?
We have the results. No off-takers, 39% developers, 18% investors or funds, 7% utility or trader, and advisory consultant, 36%. So I would say quite a diverse audience, which is good. Because we're also covering a lot of different questions. But I do want to delve a little bit into what you said before, Bruno, about Spain being one of the hottest markets in terms of PPAs. And I know it's a bit of a generic question, but it's just a bit of a discussion opener. But why do you think PPAs are more popular in Spain than in other countries? And what does Spain do differently than other EU countries?
Well, that's a good question. It's very relevant. It's always coming for every year. I can hear this question. So it's definitely in the scope and a current and an actual question. So, well, I would say one of the main answer is that I would say Spain is a huge resource of solar, renewable and solar radiation, as it is the same case for the Nordics to have a huge resource of wind. So I would say that Spain and the south of Europe is definitely one of the major areas where you can install solar photovoltaic with a large resource with a lower cost, because the more resource you have, the lower LCOE is. And the same is for the wind in the Nordics. If we compare Spain among the South European countries, Spain is definitely much more advanced in terms of permitting. It's definitely a bit more easy to develop the projects, so they're ahead of its neighbor countries than Italy and Greece, for example. So that's why for the past 4 years we managed to develop quite a huge amount of renewables, especially solar. And you can see from the 28 gigawatt, close to 28 gigawatt of projects that has been granted with environmental permitting, 24 or 25 are solar projects, comparing to the wind, which takes longer time to develop. So definitely the resource is one of the major items. The facility to develop the projects, even if it's more complicated more and more, because as I said, there's a lot of bottlenecks across the supply chain and across the administration. But I would say both of them. So in the regulation and the and the resource is definitely one of the major factors. I don't know if Eric has another view on that.
I mean, no, I think it's fairly straightforward why it's happening. I mean, why are we going for PPAs in Spain? It's also because of the subsidy regime, right? Like, if you compare it to why are you going less percentage-wise for PPAs in Germany? It's because they have such a good regime there for developers, which lets you keep the upside and you know, save your downside. So no, it's just that and resources, as you say. But over time, I think that with the current situation, with no flexibility, with very low hydro resources, I don't see how we can keep going like this without introducing more flexibility into the system. And I cannot for the life of me understand why we have to wait for this battery and capacity market, because it's needed now. You can see already that it should make sense. And so, yeah, I would urge Spanish government to and you guys, you know, Lightsource, etc., to try to put pressure on the Spanish government to develop this capacity market, because as we can see in the UK, you can see a lot of battery developments, but because you have this revenue stacking and several different ways of making money from adding flexibility to the system. But with low rainfall and no hydro, sooner or later you'd erode the investment you know, rationale for investing in Iberia if the prices will stay like this.
I just wanted to add, when I said obviously the more solar resources you have, the lower the cost of electricity is, which enables to have more competitive prices towards the neighbors in Europe. And that's why, and I will come afterwards, that's why Spain is attractive not only to hedge the Spanish local consumption, but as well to hedge the European consumption from the Spanish plants. And it is, I think, it is important to say that it's easier in Spain to develop utility scale projects. But now I say utility scale, say even above 50 megs, 58 megs, 100 megs, or above close to 500 megs capacity. And it is not the case in most of countries. You can see, so that enables the prices as well to come down and source your energy consumption from Spain.
I mean, one thing we should say as well. I mean, if you say that the Nordics maybe are a few years ahead of Spain in terms of, you know, having the same sort of market dynamics, you know, a stranded market. There's not a whole lot of interconnection with other markets, especially in the northern parts of Sweden. There's not a whole lot to other markets, and you have very good resources. What happened there, obviously, is that captured prices are now very low, and it spurred what we in Sweden call, you know, an industrial revolution in the north. You know, where they're moving in with, you know, these, you know, green steel and the different battery developers and others. You know, the data centers, and we're seeing the same sort of dynamics happening in Spain to a certain degree. I'm not going to sit here and predict an Iberian industrial revolution, but, you know, with prices being very low, there are ways of capitalizing from a demand perspective. So, you know, obviously over time that should change, but I just hope for more flexible demand and for more flexibility in the system, in order for the solar developers to really safeguard their long-term investments.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned before, you mentioned the market cannibalization before, Eric. So what impact will that have, in your opinion, on price negotiation for PPAs in the future?
Yeah, certainly. I think, you know, the more you see cannibalization, the lower the capture rate is. I mean, if the expectation is that this gets worse, it's harder and harder for offtakers to start doing pay as produced or taking any type of profile risk. Then you move much closer to base load contracts. When you move to base load contracts, that's what happened in the Nordics. We have gone in now and done a lot of projects where we've essentially tried to help investors that are being caught in this trap of signing up for a baseload contract for their huge wind farms, and the captured prices are terrible. The capture rate is sometimes below 50%, down towards 40 or even upper 30s. And when that happens and you have hedged yourself at, let's say 60%, you're losing money. And so we went in and helped quite a lot of investors and developers that essentially were losing, millions, and tried to help them secure their revenues, renegotiate, find other ways to do things. But at that point, you're very late in the game, and so if this starts to happen, if we start to see more cannibalization, my prediction is that we will move more towards baseload contracts. We will move to more complex structures, and more energy risk management will have to be taken by Bruno and his peers, as well as others, and they will essentially need to be able to manage their position, to monitor their position, and to quickly act on their position, moving towards becoming more of a trading entity, not just a let's say an investor, but also having the sort of vertically integrating in a lot of ways. And I think that's where the market is heading. And once we start seeing more of these baseload contracts, it's very important for people to realize what they are. And they are not a set it and forget it structure. They are a structure that you have to actively manage. I don't know, Bruno, is that what you're seeing as well?
It is in a way. Actually, I can say that in the past 2 years, there was a switch because we could see a lot of offtakers, especially of corporate offtakers, who didn't want to have a risk on the profile of production profile. So they ask to have a profile which is very similar to their consumption, which is base load, for example, for the most of the high intensive consumers. But on I would say the past year, it is more and more accepted that they are willing to take that risk. So they are now asking for pay as produced because they see more competitive prices, much more competitive prices, and I think that utilities and developers are the one or the few that are able or wanting to take in this risk are pricing that very high, that the base load product versus a pay as produced. So I can see a switch and a swap from the market, from the corporate, that most, I would say most of them today are accepting a pay as produced. Saying that, it is true that some offtakers does not want to have this risk profile, this risk on the profile, and they want a base load, and the most, I would say, similar technology to face that is wind rather than solar. So I think in the coming years it will be difficult to see solar developers offering base load, because, as you said, it is an active hedging you have to do, and you don't have all the tools still in the market. The market in Spain is liquid in the next coming years, up to 1 year or 2 years, but not in the long term. And it's difficult again to justify for the lenders, for the executive managers, this risk sometimes.
I think the way that the market is currently reacting is, they see the lower prices for pay as produced, but they haven't quite understood how extreme this cannibalization can get. And I think that's really where I think offtakers are going to start pulling back very, very soon from these pay as produced structures, because I don't see it being viable in the long term to be able to, you're buying at the same prices, but you're buying at 40, 50 euros, and prices during noon is essentially zero. I think corporates are slow to catch on, but they will catch on, and once they catch on, I think it's going to be harder and harder to find pay as produced. And I think then developers are going to have to develop new tools. Those tools are what I just mentioned, and I think that's going to bring more liquidity to the market. And there's another tool which we obviously hear a lot about. It's that buzzword that goes around our industry right now, which is hybridization. And I think that's really where we're going to see a lot happening. I think we're going to have to stop looking at our investments as single asset investments, start looking at them as a portfolio investment, and start trying to diversify putting different production profiles into our portfolio, not just in southern Spain or northern Spain, but also wind, also solar, floating solar in Portugal, or et cetera, trying to diversify our portfolios a little bit, and then trying to compare those to other portfolios in other countries, realizing the diversification effects that are there, and then start financing on these larger portfolio effects rather than doing it on a single asset basis. And I think that's when we start seeing the market really evolving into what I see as the market of the future. But you're right. At the time being, there's quite a lot of PPAs produced available. I'm just surprised that there is.
Yeah. On this note, I would actually like to pose one question for our audience again, because you spoke about the diverse options of PPAs, for example. And it would be interesting to see what type of PPAs is most efficient for the current market conditions for our audience. Virtual PPAs, corporate PPAs, physical PPAs, utilities, or cross-border. Maybe we can give it 5 more seconds and then we will show the results. Okay. Let's see what we have. So we have, corporate PPAs are exceedingly popular. So what's your take on this, maybe Eric?
The corporate PPAs in the current market fetch a premium. You're getting higher prices from a corporate, and so the natural tendency of investors is to try to chase the higher returns. It's always good to get a high corporate PPA. However, the corporates are generally the corporates with good credit rating and they can offer good credit support generally do not offer the same very, very high terms. I mean, I'm thinking that the big tech companies can quite often push their prices quite a bit. They push you around a little bit on the terms, etc. So you have to. There's always a trade-off. I think you can get a very good way of hedging your portfolios to do a diverse set of corporates and essentially hope for that the diversification effect of having several corporates and spreading your credit risk is a good way to do it. You can also, of course, sleeve and take advantage a little bit of utility credit support. That's another way. I think I was a little bit surprised that virtual PPAs were so high up. I think in general, physical PPAs, you have the you can perhaps sometimes manage to get a better accounting treatment and not have to rely on the mark-to-market valuation every year. And we see that quite a lot. I'm not an accounting expert, but we've definitely helped steer clients a little bit in the right direction there. So that's generally what I would say. And cross-border PPAs, I mean, we see them every now and then, but I don't think that doing a cross-border PPA with Germany, for example, you're buying. I think it's more of a buying of the guarantees of origin rather than the power, because the correlation between those two markets is very low. I don't know, Bruno, what take do you have?
Yeah, thanks. I would just implement a few things. Just saying that those items, those selections can be complementary. You can have a corporate offtaker PPA, which is virtual and cross-border at the same time. And actually, it's happening a lot of them. You can see actually, Eric, quite a few corporate PPAs with cross-border PPAs because, for example, as I said in the beginning, most of these PPAs are sourcing all the European consumption from one country instead of trying to hedge or to have one PPA for each consumption of each country, which is quite difficult and to negotiate. And in terms of pricing, it might be interesting. It is a risk definitely it is a high risk for the off-takers, and it's one of the question is who is bearing this risk today. Today the risk is majorly the off-takers who is willing to take that risk, the spread between Spain and the country of the consumption. But it is, I would say, even the PPA market is hot because of those cross-border PPAs. And the future, it was true that in the past years it was more physical PPAs, and now it comes more and more becomes more easy to, off-takers are more, I would say, comfortable with virtual PPAs and the hedge accounting. So that's why we can say it's more flexible, it's easier to implement, and we can see more and more virtual PPAs.
Yeah, for sure. I think the hedge accounting is something that has become more commonplace and easier. There's more service providers that are helping you at the moment. But nevertheless, if you can avoid it, it's quite nice. So I was quite surprised that it was so high. And yeah, when it comes to cross-border PPAs, we've done quite a lot of studies on it, and yeah, it can make sense in certain cases, especially if you want to, you know, for example, target your RE100 or your ESG targets, and you have a large consumption and you need to go for offshore, etc. Then it makes sense, but you're still exposing yourself to a large basis risk if this is hedging your consumption. So yeah, it depends on your portfolio, of course. I think all questions that we ask here today, I will answer with it depends. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. And I do want to take a bit of a step back to corporate PPAs, which you mentioned before. Maybe you could you explain what is the difference in negotiating for a utility or with a utility and a corporate?
Do you want to start, Bruno, or?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Well, I would say the question would be answered differently if it's now or if it was 3 or 4 years ago. The Spanish market, especially, for example, started with major appetite of utility PPAs. And why so? Because they have experience on energy markets. So they do know how to negotiate quickly and can close and execute PPAs in a short period of terms, and they know what they're talking about. The corporates, they have a learning curve, and they're taking years to understand what is a PPA, what's the use of it, and what's all the items and the clause of the PPA. But as of today, there's a lot of corporates who there's not much, sometimes more or equal to utility PPAs, and I wouldn't see much difference between a corporate PPA and a utility PPA in terms of tool. And they can, some of them and most of them, they can manage to close as much as quickly as a utility PPA, a bit longer, but not that much. There's still some corporates who would take like 6 months or 1 year to close PPAs, but it's fair. It's quite fair. That's it.
Eric, any thoughts on that as well?
Negotiating with the corporate generally takes longer, for sure. It depends on the corporate. Okay, so let's divert. Let's make it more complicated. Then let's say if you're negotiating with a tech giant, they have their own PPA, they have their own management team. They can negotiate quite quickly and have the sort of authority and risk policy to make their own decisions, and they don't need to go through these complex and sort of strange approval processes and board meetings, etc. If you negotiate with a corporate that rarely does a PPA, first of all, if we're negotiating for one of our clients, we have to write the PPA ourselves. And then they are not very flexible when it comes to pricing, let's say, so you often need to hold your pricing for a longer period of time. So that's another difference. And yeah, generally, it's a lack of experience, which also makes it take a little bit longer. But again, I think there's a lot of nuance within corporate PPA. It's a catch-all term, and so it depends a little bit on who it is, who their advisors are, if they're using advisors, and etc. But I have seen more complications with corporate PPAs than I've seen during utility PPAs. Utility PPAs are generally very straightforward. So depends on many factors, but in this case, it depends on which corporate is.
And I will add as well, the difference between utilities and corporates is you're bringing additionality, and that's what most of the corporates actually currently are looking for. This was a switch from the past 3-4 years, and we see the sustainability, corporate sustainability targets is definitely one of the major reason of why we see the PPA market so hot in the past years. The utilities does not care that much. They do, but not that much. It's more about pricing, and they're doing back-to-backs with corporates, but definitely bringing additionality, taking off conventional generation of the system is important. Is what we're bringing, and we're trying to fit in as well with their business, and that's why maybe, as you're saying, Eric, that's why it's taking a bit longer in negotiating, because they want to all these items to fit in with their own activity and business.
As I would say as well, if you want to do corporate PPAs, it shouldn't be a start and stop situation. It should be when you have a continuous portfolio and you continuously keep talking to corporates, and you sort of a little bit more opportunistically close to PPAs, rather than this sort of, okay, I have a project, I need to negotiate a PPA, okay, I found a corporate. It's better to continuously say, we have volumes here, do you want to buy them, Mr. Corporate? And then you try to have a portfolio of these corporates around at all times and try to close some PPAs when you can, because I think that's a much more efficient process than the alternative, because also then you can close a little bit on additionality, which you can't always do when you have these new projects coming in, and you have to restart negotiations all the time. Many of our clients, especially the more the ones with more cash, they often just say, well, I'm just going to go take FID, I'm just going to build the project, and then I'm going to figure out my financing later. And that obviously doesn't work with a corporate PPA, because then you're not bringing additionality anymore. And so it's better than to have several of these processes in the pipeline that you can execute on opportunistically when you need to. That's how I would manage a process like that, and how we've done it in the past.
Mm-hmm. And then a question that I hear coming up more and more frequently at the moment is, how can corporate PPAs become more available for SMEs, for example? So what would be your take on this? And maybe Bruno, you can go first.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Dana. It's difficult to answer that because there is a will from all the market and for all the consumers to source renewable energy and to source at lower prices. And as of today, I would say most of the off-takers are, I would say, mostly investment grade rated or equivalent. The government in Spain, and I know that in some countries are replicating this scheme, is that they are trying to enable or to back up some credit support guarantees for those small and medium companies only on the high-intensive industry. This is starting slowly because it's not an easy process, so it's going slowly. This is a first step, but the first I would say the first issue is that the lenders, or even if you go on your own equity, the risk is the counterparty risk, and if you want to hedge that risk, you filtering and you ask for investment grade quality. And that's why most of the time we're excluding the medium companies, small medium companies out of the scope, and it's difficult for them to source renewable energy. So we would need tools. We need different, and this is where we eventually need the government here to intervene, not on price, but to give flexibility, to give tools, for the lenders and for us. To sell or to present offer products to such companies.
It's I adore your optimism, hoping that the Spanish government will do something positive for you. I mean, it would be great, wouldn't it? One day maybe. I think one way of solving it that we've seen, a few investors doing is bundling, essentially taking several of corporates and putting them into one basket and telling them you get the same terms, and if one of you drops out, the other one picks up the slack. It's a structure that we've seen work. It works on diversification and it can work, but it's a lot more work, of course. We've seen it also in offshore, in other countries. We've seen corporates, coming together in large clusters. We also saw it here in Spain with the tender that was announced late last year, early this year, with the association of corporates that was trying to look for volumes together. I think these are things that could work. These are things that could probably be helped by buy-side advisors that would come together and essentially structure these larger deals in returns for your success fees. I think that's a business line that could be developed, and I think it would be good for both Bruno and myself if more of that came to be. It would help investors, it would help buyers. So I see that as a potential. If any there's 36% advisors in the crowd today, so maybe some of those could pick up that slack.
Mm-hmm. And at this point, I would like to bring in a question from the audience, which is how can the change of government or political parties have an effect on ongoing or future PPA contracts in Spain? Bruno, this question was directed at you, actually.
That's a $1 million or euro question, I would say. This is our expectation and the question mark for the coming month. You know that there's a change in the politics in Spain. There's a regional election in May and a national election by the end of the year. And definitely that may have an impact on the regulation and definitely as well on how we will face PPA negotiation. We do know that, or it's very generic, and maybe it's a topic that the left wing, the socialist, likes to intervene and the right wing, Partido Popular, probably less as possible. Our position, but it's the market position from the developer side, is asking for the government to intervene as less as possible, because the intervention is giving wrong signals to the market. Is preventing from the investors to invest. Is it preventing the PPAs to be performed as well? And I can't say what will be done on the coming months or afterwards, but I know that the actual government is willing to push by the end of the year or before the end of the year to perform this new market reform at Spanish level and the European level. And there is a big rush on this. We know that as well, that that from the right wing, the Partido Popular, probably, or what we expect from them is that, because we know that from the socialists that they won't, or they will try not to delay the deadlines, and probably there's a slight possibility. If the right wing wins, that the deadlines, or they can hear us, and eventually the deadlines can be postponed, because it will be very tough to connect all the projects by June 2025. But it's a coin in the air. It's very difficult to see or to say what will happen or what we expect from them.
Mm-hmm. Eric, what's your take on this?
I'm not a Spanish expert on politics. I'm not an expert of Spanish politics. From my point of view, I think it's hard to see how things could get much worse. I would say the major thing that I would like to see is for Miteco to get more resources. They are, I think, 10 people. They're doing so many things at the same time. If you hire, 30 people more, I think Spain will make billions. I think it's that simple. You could potentially create the capacity market, which would secure billions in investment, flexibility investments, etc. and you could make sure that these sort of stop and go permitting bottlenecks doesn't happen, because obviously it's not good for anyone that there was no permits given almost, and then all of a sudden they came all at once. The grid will have a hard time keeping up if everything comes at once. The supply chain, as Bruno alluded to earlier, banks with how much money they will be able to do at the same time, lend at the same time. It's just this. There's constantly something. I think in the Spanish market, there's always some sort of regulatory issue that we're trying to overcome. Been active in the market now for 2-3 years, and it's all, you're always talking about, if we can, once this is over, but there's always a new thing. And so I think if the Spanish regulatory bodies would take a more long-term view, get more resources, and start looking at the market as something that they should support, because I think ultimately the Spanish solar industry is developing despite the government, not because of any sort of help that they're giving.
Thank you, Eric. And I want to move on to a slightly different topic that I think it's a hot topic right now of discussion. But before that, I want to quickly encourage again our audience to post their questions if they have any, as we're about to run out of time for this webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free now, and we will get to them in a bit. But I would like to switch the focus onto batteries at the moment, which we've been talking about recently, I think, which is a hot topic, an upcoming topic, but also surrounded with a lot of uncertainty still. And at this point, I would quickly like to again pose the poll question to our audience before we jump into the discussion. And I would like to know from our audience, what are the main challenges you are facing when realizing a battery project or system in conjunction with a solar PV project?
Well,
yeah, now I would like to implement what Eric was saying about that. But definitely, the implementation of the regulation in the coming months or years on market capacity, on how to implement storage hybridization is very important and relevant for the next year and years, and that will give flexibility to the market. That will enable projects to be developed in an easier way, and eventually as well, and even to mitigate the risks of, as you say, cannibalization or the switch on the demand profile.
Yeah, and saving the grid a little bit from all of this this stuff, and I think several nodes we're seeing heavy curtailment at the moment, which is not good for anyone. So it doesn't make sense to not have more flexibility. And I think in this quick poll here, we should have probably added sources of revenue or revenue stacking, because that's really what is needed. I think
see the results. Yeah. So based off of your thoughts now, what do you think about the results you received?
I would have probably added another option here, which is ability to get paid or revenue stacking or something like that, because the reason why we have a UK market is because of exactly that you can get paid in so many ways, by upregulating, downregulating, automatically downregulating, manually downregulating, or etc. And it makes it so that and obviously there's a myriad of different ways to get paid in the UK. I can't remember all of them. I was part of a little bit of a project last year, and we're helping a big portfolio in the UK doing this co-located battery and solar portfolio. We're hoping that the press release will come out any day now for the first battery PPA that we signed, which was quite an interesting one. And so, we at Pexapark, we just see this as something crucial. We have a flexibility and storage team that have started to negotiate, or started to both negotiate and quantify this. We're looking heavily into several several areas of Europe, the Nordics, Spain, but we're just waiting for the capacity markets to develop. And I think that's unfortunate that Miteco and Spain in general cannot focus on this, because this would really save investors, and ultimately it's good for the country, it's good for the world if we add more solar and wind capacity, but we cannot add more if we don't have this flexibility. And especially now with the low rainfall and the lack of hydro, where is the flexibility going to come from?
Mm-hmm. So how do you think that batteries will impact PPA contract structures in the future?
Oh, the battery PPA market is fantastically interesting. I think the way you essentially structure battery PPA is radically different, really, from a normal PPA, because now you often have to either negotiate with one party, but you have to negotiate with how they offtake and how they pay for the power, or you have to negotiate with two parties, and that's often the case. One power offtaker and one battery optimizer. Their sort of internal communication and where you meter the output, how you get paid for the output, what happens if one of them goes insolvent, etc. It makes the whole negotiation and the contractual interactions much more complex, and so that's something that we're focusing heavily on at the moment, and we see this as part of the future, and the future that we're hoping to be able to support and advise on very, very soon.
Yeah, and Bruno, what's the developer's perspective on this?
Well, more or less same as Eric say. I would say it would depend on the scheme, on the PPA scheme. Either you will have a PPA separated from the storage or the battery, and the storage will enable to fulfill the requirements of the PPA. That will be more flexible. Or you have a PPA including the batteries, and definitely it will need a much more work on the negotiation, understanding what are the requirements on the PPA, and how we can fulfill the needs of the client, because there's a lot of flexibility that both counterparties, and especially the off-takers, need to understand how it works and how it has to be implemented within the PPA.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both. I see that we do not have any further questions at the moment. Actually, we did have a few more questions, but then we had additional comments saying, "Oh, my question has already been answered," so that's good. We covered a lot of information here. This was also all the time we had, unfortunately, for this webinar today. I want to thank you both so much for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope you had a good time as well. Yes, and to our audience, if you would like to find out more about the PPA market in Spain from a variety of angles, not only from about PPAs, feel free to join our summit on the 6th of July. And as I mentioned before, for everybody who attended today, you're eligible for a 15% discount for your ticket. And we would love to see you there. Besides the Spain Summit, we also have a few more events coming up in the next few months, so please do check out our website. And for any questions, any more remarks, feel free to reach out to me, and I will be happy to pass on additional questions to both Eric and Bruno, and potentially bring you in touch. And again, thank you for being here. Have a lovely day, and all the best.
Bye, everyone. Pleasure. Thank you.